Have you ever wanted a guarantee? Not just a vague promise, but actual solid proof that everything's going to work out? Well, we're going to break down an ancient story from Genesis that's all about that. It's about a man named Abram who basically asks God for a guarantee, and the answer he gets is, wow, it's dramatic, it's bloody, and it is absolutely binding. So the whole thing kicks off with this incredibly raw human moment. Abram has been promised all these amazing things, but he just cuts right to the chase. He's got wealth, he's got protection, but he doesn't have an heir. You can almost hear the frustration in his voice, like, what's the point of all this if my legacy just stops with me?
And that's really the big question driving this entire chapter, isn't it? When you're facing a promise so huge it feels impossible, how can you know, really be sure that it's going to happen? Abram's quest for that answer is what we're going to unpack.
Okay, so first let's get into Abram's crisis. He's basically living in this huge gap between what God has promised and what he sees every single day. On the one hand, he's got this divine word. On the other, he's got an empty house, no son. And you can see the disconnect right here. God says, your reward will be great. Abram looks at his life and says, but you haven't given me any kids. He's so sure it's not going to happen, he's already got a plan B. His head servant, a guy named Eliezer, is slated to inherit everything. So for Abram, the promise feels kind of abstract, but the lack of a son, that is painfully real. So Abram lays out his problem, his doubt, all of it. And God's response isn't just a simple, hey, don't worry about it. No, he decides to escalate the promise to a cosmic scale. First things first, God tackles that immediate fear head on. The answer is super direct, no room for misunderstanding. He completely shuts down Abram's backup plan. Nope, Eliezer is not your heir. You personally will have a son of your own. But then God just blows the whole thing wide open. He takes Abram outside, gets him out from under the roof of his tent, away from his limited way of thinking, and just points up at the night sky. He doesn't just promise one son anymore. He promises a whole nation of descendants, so many you couldn't possibly count them, just like the stars. It is an absolutely massive answer to a very personal problem. And this right here, this is the pivot point of the whole story. Faced with this impossible, mind-boggling promise, what does Abram do? He believes. And the text makes it clear this is a huge deal. It's his faith, not something he did, that puts him in a right relationship with God. But wait, the story's not over, because Abram has another question. See, he was promised descendants, but he was also promised a specific piece of land. And even after that incredible Starry Night promise, he still needs some assurance on this other point. And this is where things get, they get weird and a little bloody. Yup, Abram asks for proof. Even after that huge moment of faith, he's still human, right? His need for some kind of certainty comes right back. How can I be sure? It's a fair question, and it demands an answer that's more than just words. And the answer he gets is intense. So God doesn't just say, trust me. He gives Abram a to-do list. And it's for this deeply physical, very symbolic ceremony. He tells him to gather these specific animals, kill them, and then slice the bigger ones right down the middle, making this gruesome pathway between the halves. And Abram's job isn't over. He has to stand guard and keep birds of prey away. Every single step here is deliberate and just loaded with meaning. So you're probably wondering, what on earth is going on here? Well, this isn't just some random, bizarre ritual. This is how you signed a covenant, the most serious, binding contract imaginable back then. The two parties making the deal would literally walk down that path between the animal halves. And by doing that, they were basically saying, if I break my end of this deal, may I end up just like these animals, torn in two. It's a life or death contract, a self-imposed curse if you break it. It is serious business. Okay, but before this contract gets finalized, you got to read the fine print, right? God lays out the terms and conditions. And just like the ceremony itself, the future isn't all sunshine and roses. There's a dark prophecy attached to this promise. The whole atmosphere just shifts. The sun sets, and Abram is overcome by the supernatural deep sleep and what's described as a terrifying darkness. This is setting the stage for a revelation that's as much a warning as it is a promise. So in this vision, God spells out the next 400 years for Abram's descendants. Yes, the promise of the land will come true, but not before they endure centuries of slavery and oppression in another country. But the prophecy doesn't end there. It also includes their freedom, that they'll come out with great wealth, and that the nation that enslaved them will be judged. And only then, 4 generations later, will they finally come back to this land. The guarantee, it turns out, comes with a heavy price.
And now, we finally get to the climax. The stage is set, the animals are arranged, the terms have been laid out. It's time to sign the contract. This part is just incredible. After it gets dark, Abram sees these symbols of God's own presence, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch, and they pass down that path between the animal pieces. But here's the kicker. Who isn't walking that path? Abram. God walks it alone. He takes the entire weight of that oath onto himself. He is basically saying, if I break this promise to you, may I be the one torn apart. It's a completely unconditional guarantee. And just like that, with that fiery display, the deal is sealed. It's official, it's binding, it's done. Abram asked for a sign, for a way to be absolutely sure, and this was the answer. A one-sided, unbreakable contract signed in fire by God himself. And the covenant gets incredibly specific about the land, too. This isn't some vague land over there kind of promise. It explicitly names the 10 different groups of people living there at the time, defining the territory from the River of Egypt all the way to the Great Euphrates. See, this isn't just a random list of names. This kind of detail grounds the whole cosmic promise in a real, tangible place. It adds legal and political weight to the guarantee.
So in the end, Abram's story leaves us with this really powerful question. His honest doubt, his need for proof, was met with this dramatic, unforgettable sign. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own time, an age full of doubt, what does it really mean for us to ask for a guarantee? And what might an answer even look like today?